I want to propose a theory and see what you think of it. In Ephesians 5, Paul gives Christ's relationship with the church as the paradigm for marriage, and implicitly, explicitly referring to Christ's sacrifice of his body, laying down his life, I should say, for his body, the church. I think that second to that, the best concrete example we get of how relations between man and woman in marriage should look like is between Jesus and Mary at the wedding at Cana, even though they were not husband and wife, obviously. Yeah. But and that may seem like a strange claim for that reason. They weren't married, but this is an interaction between the only perfect man and the only perfect woman who ever lived. And it's at a wedding. And some people would argue that that's when Jesus instituted marriage, although we aren't sure exactly when that sacrament was instituted. And so I think it'd be crazy not to look at that interaction that they have at this wedding feast as not teaching us something, not only about their specific and unique relationship, which it obviously tells us a great deal about, Mariology, for instance, but about relationship between men and women, and particularly husbands and wives. And I think it tells us a lot about what mutual submission, the phrase that John Paul II used, because I don't think that's a new idea with John Paul II. I think that Pius XII, in his allocution on the subject of authority and submission in marriage, lays out something that looks an awful lot like mutual submission, but probably actually just it's more clear than John Paul II was about how that fits with the whole tradition of the church. Yeah. But anyway, so the wedding at Cana, Mary tells Jesus they have no wine. And she doesn't even ask him to do anything, but there's clearly an implied request there, right? She lays out the problem for him. She does not command him. She does not tell him what to do. And he says, "Woman, what have you to do with me, or what has this to do with me?" I don't know if anybody knows exactly what that means, but one way it could possibly be taken is, this just sort of referring us to the fact that he's not obligated to do this, under obedience to his mother. And he says, "My hour has not yet come," indicating that to do this would involve a sacrifice of bringing about the course of events leading to his passion. Now, and also, of course, his hour also referring to his glorification, his revelation of being, the Son of God by performing miracles. But after that, she says, "Do whatever he tells you." So what's interesting to me is so he does it. She doesn't ask him, but he does it. And I see it as being a good example of how this sort of mutual submission works, because basically he is treating it's a your wish is my command kind of thing. He wasn't commanded, he wasn't given a command, but he's treating a wish as though it were a command. And it is in this sense that there is a mutual submission. And an obedience to the needs of the wife, so to speak, the husband submitting himself to that, even though it's maybe not obedience in the sort of normal, strict, literal sense of that word. Yeah. And then what she ends by doing is referring everybody back to his authority. And particularly, you could say, the children analogously in that situation. Yes. She is referring everything back to his authority after he has sort of submitted himself. So I don't know. Yes. I think that tells us a lot about what, this relationship and mutual submission would actually look like.
Yeah, I love that. And what I love two other little aspects that, number one, Mary is her feminine sensitivity of noticing. She is concerned that the bride and the groom are going to be embarrassed, right? That we've run out of wine. She's really concerned about others and their needs and their feelings. She's concerned about that. And then, of course, yes, she brings it to Jesus. And then to say, do whatever he tells you, it's an expression of trust in him, because she is not dictating exactly what he should do, but she is making clear something that her own feminine intuition has zeroed in on, and she is communicating that. And that's the thing. husbands do need to trust their wives' intuition, especially about their kids. They have a super sense about it, and it doesn't mean that a dad doesn't have any sense or that a wife couldn't be wrong, but we got to listen, right? But she's presenting her need, right? And she didn't just present a whole bunch of needs, and she presents an important need. But then to say do whatever he tells you expresses utter trust. Do something about it. And then she's going to live with the consequences of whatever he decides to do, because she didn't dictate. She's like, listen, here is this problem. I trust you to solve it. I trust you to do something about it. And that's, again, like, do something. Sometimes we women want to go and do everything. The hardest thing about being a woman sometimes is sitting around waiting for him to do something. It's hard, but then we don't always like what he does, right? So her expression of trust in him to do it. And the way you put it, that your wish is my command, again and again, I talk about in the book that what ultimately makes a man happy is to be well received. If what he does is well received, if it makes his wife happy, he feels good and affirmed. So actually what's going to make a husband most happy is when she's happy. So he wants nothing more than to make her happy. So yes, part of that mutual submission is, okay, it's my job to do things to make her happy, right? And it's her part to receive those things well and in the spirit in which they're given, even when, of course, they're not always perfect, or maybe they're not always what she imagined. So I think that's a tremendous biblical example to really talk about that. Yeah.